This is Marty Wilson. I'm in the home of Frank Lanterman, and we're here with Frank, and Frank's going to tell us about his life in Monroe County. It's today is February 9th, 2023, and Amy and Tanya are here as well. And Frank, I thought we'd start with where and when you were born and who your parents were.
Okay, I was born on, I think it's 165 North Cortlandt Street. There's a barber shop across the street from the house, from where I was born on North Cortlandt Street. Next to Minnie Dunning's house sits up in the bank, and then the house next to it was 165 North Cortlandt. That's where I was born.
And that was a house, private residence.
It was a private residence.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when?
In February 11th, 1923.
So today's February 9th. So in 2 days you'll be 100 years old.
Exactly.
Wow. What were your parents' names?
My mother was Frida Wilson Lanterman, and my dad was James Harold Lanterman.
And was this your house that you were born in? I assume it was your house?
I was born in the house at 165 North Cortlandt Street. I don't think they owned it. I think they rented it, but I'm not sure. I couldn't be positive about that. I don't think so, because we moved from there to 87 North Green Street, where I lived all of my life from there on in. When I went in the Navy and everything, I was at 87 North Green Street. There's, what is the Lackawanna Avenue, and then
Green Street.
East Broad Street.
Right, East Broad
East
Street.
Broad Street, and there's Lackawanna Avenue, North Green, from East Broad. And ours was the very first house on the right on North Green, which is 87 North Green Street.
Okay. And you went to school?
I lived there until I went in the Navy in 1946.
No,
And
43.
Pardon me?
43 you went in the Navy.
43, yeah, 43. I got out in 46, yeah. Thank you for correcting me, Michael. Yeah.
And so you went to local schools, obviously.
I went to East Stroudsburg High School, junior high. Junior high is up there, still the building's there, up on East Broad Street. Before you go up the hill, I don't.
It's J.M. Hill now.
What is it, J.M.
Hill
Hill?
School.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was where when I went to school, it was a
Elementary.
grade school.
Mm-hmm.
I went to 7th grade, and then from 7th grade, came over to North Cortlandt Street for 8th, 9th, and 10th, and then on. Yeah.
For the high school, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What memories do you have as a young person in Monroe County?
Well, my grandfather was mayor of East Stroudsburg in 1930, and I used to go every night. My grandfather on South Cortlandt Street. The building is still there. I think it's a beauty parlor now. That recently had a fire. Mrs. Vogler. It was Mrs. Vogler's store, and my grandfather. Every night, the funeral home is where it still sits. I would get down. We lived up on North Green Street, as I said, 87 North Green. I would walk down to the funeral home because my grandfather, every night, would go from the funeral home over to Mrs. Vogler's for a White Owl cigar, and I would get 5 cents worth of candy, which I got 2 like bolster bars for 5 cents. So every night I made sure I was there when he went for his White Owl cigar.
Did you play sports or anything in high school? Did you?
No, I did not. I was not sports inclined, and I did a lot of driving around. I had my grandfather's 1934 Graham supercharged car with me. I was probably the only person in school had a car, because it was my grandfather's, however, and I was always driving somewhere for the school with the Graham Page car.
What was that? The name Lanterman's associated with the funeral home, of course, and so
Yeah, well, always. The funeral home was started in 1870 in its present location. It shows the wooden building here. The picture of it hangs on the wall here. Same place it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And the same building. Lillian will get the picture and show you. But it was Smith and Lanterman. Smith being my grandmother Lanterman's father, John Irvin Smith, and that's where my Uncle John Lanterman was named after. And so it was Smith and Lanterman until 1900, and then it became Robb and Lanterman. Mr. Robb was no relation, and it was Robb and Lanterman until 1920, when Mr. Robb got mad because my grandfather Lanterman was taking my father, J. Harold Lanterman, and my uncle John Irving Lanterman in as partners to be J.H. Lanterman and Sons, and that made Mr. Robb mad. He would have nothing to do with the Lanterman. As a matter of fact, when he died, the Kaiser Funeral Home, which is now Clark Funeral Home, buried him. He wouldn't even have Lanterman's buried.
So you were born into this.
I was born into the funeral business. Yeah. Grew up, didn't know any better, and never regretted it. As far as that goes, I actually, if you can enjoy the funeral business, I don't want it misunderstood, but I always found them grateful for everything I would do, and it was rewarding to me to do it, you know.
What was it like being associated with this industry as a young person, as a child? Because my grandparents were running. The funeral business was always, as I say, from 1870, from this building where it is now.
Yeah, physically the
But it was a wooden. I think Lillian has a picture of the original wooden building in 1870. That's the same building, but they bricked it up and put the brick front in 1921. I think the brick fronting was put on.
Oh, very neat.
But that's the original.
But what was it like to be a child when you're? One would think a child would recoil at the thought of.
Would what?
At the thought of dead bodies, but no.
It didn't bother me.
No.
I didn't know any better.
Oh, right. So, how old were you when you started working, doing chores, errands for them?
In the funeral home? Well, actually, because I went in the Navy when I was 18, World War II. In 1943, I was drafted into the Navy, and so actually I didn't get to the funeral business until I got out in 1946. This would be when I actually started with the funeral business.
Were you destined? I mean, were you going to do that? Had you planned on it throughout high school?
Pardon me?
When you were in high school, is that what you saw as your future, working at the funeral home?
My father gave me one choice: go to Eccles College of Embalming in Philadelphia, or go nowhere. So I went to Eccles College of Embalming in Philadelphia.
I got a great picture of that too. I should show you that.
Yeah, we have that right out here.
Yeah.
Michael can show you that.
Yeah.
That was on 16th and 17th and Diamond. Now you need a Sherman tank to go through there, but even in those years, they warned you to not go out by yourself at night at 17th and Diamond in Philadelphia. But now, as I say, they would suggest if you're white that you go in it with a Sherman tank to go through there.
How long was your schooling? How long were you in school there?
In Echoes College only for 1 year.
1 year, okay.
Yeah.
1 year, and then you came back to East Stroudsburg?
Yeah. I lived in an apartment, had a room in an apartment at 1624 Diamond Street. Does that say on the back of it?
17th and Diamond.
17th and Diamond.
Class of 1942.
That's right. I'm on there, over on this side, I think, over toward me, down in the front row. You may not recognize me because I don't look like I did then. But I could show you if you want to bring it over here. Let's see. That's me right there.
Right there. Handsome gent.
I don't know
So
about
before we
that.
get off of your war service, where did you serve during the war?
I beg your pardon?
Where did you serve during the war?
I was in, well, I started in Sampson Naval Air Station in Sampson, New York. That's where I started my training for the Navy. And then I went from the naval training over to the Naval Hospital in Sampson, which was, here was the training station, here was the hospital section. And then I went over and worked in the hospital section. Then I went from there to St. Albans, New York, briefly at the facility there, and then up to Halifax, Nova Scotia, where I went overseas. That's where I boarded LST landing ship tank, LST 492, for the invasion of Normandy, in which we were 6 hours before H hour in Normandy on D-Day.
You were at Normandy on D-Day.
I was in Normandy on D-Day, yes, on board LST 492. I never went out and on the shore. I was always on the ship.
So your job was to carry soldiers in and then go back.
Exactly, you know.
They took the wounded back. They brought the
We
wounded out.
would take soldiers and equipment over and bring wounded, and both American and, if they were German as well, back to Plymouth, England.
Which was where he was
Do
stationed.
you have vivid memories of that day?
Oh yeah.
Can you share one of them with us?
Pardon me?
Can you share something?
Well, it was, we shuttled back and forth, and I remember one time I was giving one of the people on the LSC, the bottom, of course, was an open where you carried tanks and equipment, but coming back, it became more or less like a hospital ship. And I know I was giving this one young man offering him a cigarette. Don't give him a cigarette, he's a German. I said, I don't care if he is. We're taking him back as a wounded person, and if he wants a cigarette, I'm going to give it to him.
No kidding.
But back to Plymouth, England. So we went back and forth. We took soldiers over and brought wounded and whoever needed to be come back.
Now, to clarify, you're going back to a ship, right? You're not going all the way back to England.
No, all the way back
So
from.
you're going all the way back to England and then bringing another load over.
Exactly. We went back and forth from Plymouth, England to Omaha Beach.
How long was that trip one way?
Oh, I don't remember truthfully. A couple days, I'd say maybe 2 days or so.
Oh.
I don't honestly remember.
Maybe
I mean,
3
you know.
hours.
Huh.
be truthful about it, but
Yeah.
it wasn't like 3 or 4 hours. It was at least an overnight, I would say.
And then did you continue to supply the troops for the next few weeks as they're moving inland?
Did I what?
Did you continue to run supplies to Normandy from England over the next few weeks?
Yes. And then I went from there to southern France, however, and finally ended up in charge of base hospital number 9 in Oran, Algeria, which was a big hospital. And I liked Oran. Oran's a big city, of course.
They made you the inspector there, didn't they?
Yes,
Health
I was
inspector?
an inspector of both Army, Navy, and Marines for the city of Oran.
What did you inspect?
The facilities that was housing the Navy people, Army people, or Navy people.
Huh.
Mm.
Is that where you were when the war ended?
Yes. Well, I left there in 1946. Yeah, I was discharged in Mayport, Florida, which is the seaport for Jacksonville.
Okay.
I came back to Jacksonville and got discharged from there in 1946. But otherwise, I was always there in Oran, Algeria.
And then you came back to Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania.
Exactly.
East Stroudsburg.
East Stroudsburg.
Got to see all that.
Yeah.
And you, at that point, you had your, was it a license? Do you need a license to?
Yes, for funeral director, yeah. And I joined the Lanterman Funeral Home in 1946.
And at that point, who's in charge? Your dad? Is your grandfather still around? Or
My grandfather died in 1943.
okay.
He had a heart attack in February 1943 and died in the Rosencrantz Hospital, which now Charlie Garris has an apartment building. That was the old Carl B. Rosencrantz Hospital. And you didn't know that?
I did not know that.
The apartment building that Charlie Garris had was the Carl B. Dr. Rosencrantz. His house, if you want, is for sale. Up the corner of Antelope and Smith, there's a nice big home. That was Dr. Rosencrantz's house. We went by there today, remember? And you said, oh, there's a for sale sign for it. Yeah. Somebody had bought it, builders, I think, and redid it and so forth. But it's always been a nice house. So if you want to buy a nice house on the corner of Antelope and Smith, that would be the Dr. Carl B. Rosencrantz's mansion. And it is actually a mansion.
Yeah. So you come back and you start working for your dad then?
I'm working for the Lanterman Funeral Home. Well, no. I went, when I got out of the Navy, they really, as we had my dad, my uncle, and we had a licensed lady embalmer by the name of Elizabeth Smith who was employed. They already had enough people at the funeral home that they didn't need me or feel they could afford me. So I went to the A.F. Kohler Funeral Home in West York, Pennsylvania. And Ammon Kohler, nice, they're old couple. They were delighted to have me because they had a son who turned out to be an alcoholic, and they had to get him out of their business. So they were glad to have me replace I actually became their son, in effect, because I don't know whatever happened. They had nothing to do with it. They kicked him out of the funeral business because he'd be at funerals drunk and wouldn't close the back of the hearse sometimes, and casket could slide out. He was a disaster for them. So,
how long were you out there?
Oh, I was in York for good, probably 3 years. I live with the Gattrells, Margaret and Lee Gattrell, who the funeral home was here, and then there was a fire company, and then there was a house where the Gattrells lived, and I had a room in their third floor, and that's all I had to do was walk from here across the fire company's lot to the funeral home. And the Kohlers were lovely old people, and I liked at that time, West York was nice. Like York, they tell me today, is like every other place. Deteriorated. Matter of fact, downtown York, they tell you, is very dangerous. So
York's a bigger place than East Stroudsburg.
Pardon me?
York is a larger place.
Oh, York's a city. It was
Yeah.
always a city.
So was it very different in terms of the funeral business in York than it was in East Stroudsburg?
Well, no, because I was in West York, which is as like being Stroudsburg, East Stroudsburg. You know, we were not in the big downtown. I can't remember. Strachan Strine were the big downtown funeral directors in York, with Strachan Strine, and they were out on East Market. We were out on West Market.
Okay.
If you were anybody in York, you had Strachan Strine.
So there's a status involved.
Oh, absolutely.
Boy,
Always has been.
Tell me about that. What did it explain?
Yeah, even so, with me, you had me. You didn't have the Zimmerman Funeral Home because that was a little building up there on North Cortlandt Street. They went out of business because they were not going to go to Lanterman's, and it's always been sort of that way.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Now you told us a story when I was here last week about the Zimmerman Funeral Home.
Yeah.
Something about the woman was sitting by the phone.
Beth Zimmerman. Yeah, they were having a church dinner, and she couldn't come because Mrs. So-and-so was expected to die most any minute, and she had to stay by her phone. And, well, when the people at the church heard that she was waiting for their parent, they wouldn't have anything to do with her.
And they came to you, right?
They came to me, yeah.
Because they saw her as being opportunistic or something, I guess.
Right.
Wow. All right, so you're out there for 3 years, and then you get a phone call from your dad, or what happens?
What?
You're in West York for 3 years,
Yeah.
and then do you get a phone call from your dad, or how do you end up back?
Well, there finally, became a place available for me at the Lanterman, because there was my father, J. Harold Lanterman, John I. Lanterman, plus Elizabeth Smith. She was the only licensed lady embalmer funeral director in Monroe County for years. Lizzie Smith was, I think if there's a book on, I think she's listed in that book. If you, I don't know what the book is called.
Women Who Made History in Monroe
Right,
County.
she would be, it tells about Elizabeth Smith being at the Lanterman Funeral Home, yeah.
And so you come back to East Stroudsburg
Yeah.
and start working for your dad. Any memories of those early days going to
Right,
work for your dad?
1946,
Yeah,
when I got out of the Navy.
out of the Navy. So you're back here at 49?
Well, I went to York first. Yeah, it was probably, I was in York I'd say probably 2 years, yeah.
Okay.
47, 48, yeah. Around that time, yeah.
And what was it like coming home and working for your dad?
Oh, it was, I sort of, they were willing to let me, I guess maybe I was, I don't know, I took over sort of, and so finally my Uncle John quit, I guess. He couldn't stand me, he thought I was overbearing, and he probably was right. And so then I eventually took over, and my dad was gone, my uncle was gone. It was me, which is what I wanted. I wanted the big chief.
What year roughly would you say, give or take?
Oh,
19, let's say 1946, 47.
Oh, so right away you kind
Right
of
away, oh yeah. Yeah, I didn't lose any time.
Did you build that building or did your dad?
Oh, no. That building, that was the same building in 1870. That was built by Mr. Smith, who was my grandmother Lanterman. John Irvin Smith was my grandmother Lanterman's father. And it went from there to my grandmother Lanterman married Ethel Smith, married J. Harold Lanterman, so she was Ethel Smith Lanterman, and then it became from there on into the Lanterman side.
and she had the furniture store side of it.
Pardon me?
She had the furniture
Store. And music, and
Right.
guitars, pianos.
In those days, funeral homes had furniture and
Furniture one
funeral
side,
business. Yeah.
funeral the next, and the building next was my grandmother's guitars, pianos, Victrolas, radios.
Yeah.
That was Mrs. J.
So the funeral home sold furniture?
Oh, absolutely.
A lot of funeral homes.
Until
did.
that was very, my dad loved the furniture business until I did it. He was not happy when I did. I did away with the furniture business in 1946. But, he liked the furniture business,
Was it
which a big profit in furniture too.
Was it a question of economics? The funeral home didn't bring enough money in, or?
At that time, originally, up until the late 1940s or mid 1940s, most funerals were not held in funeral homes; they were held in people's homes, and you sometimes had to put the caskets in and that through the windows because you couldn't make the turns to put them into their living room for the viewing.
So, what was your role then in all of that? I mean, how did it? Can you walk us through a typical funeral? How did it work? Somebody died, and then do you go to the house and pick up the body, or?
Yes, Michael has a picture or something. I
I'll show
don't
you
know
an early 1920s advertisement for furniture for the funeral home.
what is that a picture of.
Yeah.
Store with, maybe we can get
What's that a
video of
picture
this
of?
after when we're done.
I can't see it. What is the picture of? Oh, that's the J.S. Lanterman said that was the furniture store. Yeah. Furniture. Yeah.
But
The
they-
furniture store. This side was the furniture store. This side was funeral home. The same building that's there now, except the side that became was an open, not open, but glass show windows on where the building is. Let me show you here. Oh, well, that's not the building. No, we don't have the building anywhere.
It's right
so.
there. That's
No, that's the original building. Yeah, this side was funeral home. This side was furniture store.
Okay.
And so of course, the furniture store. This was a display window where we put furniture for sale in the display window, and then eventually, I did away with that, and both sides became funeral home.
But
So-
didn't they used to build the caskets? A lot
Pardon?
of
Yeah,
funeral home
oh
furniture
yeah,
stores built
uh-huh,
the caskets. And
not
that's-
in my time,
not
but
your
in my
time, but
dad's
previous,
grandfather's time. Yeah,
They used to build the caskets.
they
Yes.
built the caskets. Yeah.
So anyway, getting back to my question, so you would pick up the body, and if I'm going in shady territory here, let me know. But you would bring it back, and the funeral home.
Right.
The function of the funeral home was to embalm the body and put it in a casket,
Right.
And then you took it back to the person's house for the funeral.
Pretty much so, up until in by the 1940s. Then that you didn't go. You came to the funeral home for viewings and stuff. But prior to that, yeah, pretty much, it was always held in the person's home.
Yeah.
Huh.
The lighting is, he's got a few of the lamps that you would set on each end of the casket in the room over here, and they're specifically made to be very dim. I remember you telling me.
Can't hear what he's saying.
About the torches, the lamps
Oh,
next to
they're out
the
here in
casket,
dining
right?
room,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that they would be purposely dim.
Right.
Well, because
Yeah.
people didn't get involved as quickly back then, and they started to deteriorate.
So,
You also had to do a lot of the legwork, Frank. There was a lot.
Do what?
There was
A lot
a
of
lot of
lifting.
lifting and moving equipment. And
Oh yeah. Oh definitely.
So can
yes.
you tell us about that?
We had a paneled Ford truck. I did all the funeral home, the cemeteries at that time did not have the lowering device and tents and so forth. We at the funeral home did. I had to go up to the cemetery and put up the tents and put up the lowering device so that when we got there with the funeral, the tent and lowering device was there that we could put the casket on to lower it into the grave. Eventually, the cemeteries got where they had that equipment, which is where it should have been to begin with, but it wasn't.
Hmm.
And
how busy were you? I mean, how many funerals would there be in a year on a given year?
Originally, I was doing, when I sold the funeral home, I was doing 400 funerals a year. I was the biggest and largest funeral home in Monroe County, but now it wasn't always that way. It may have done maybe a little over 100. Then of course it kept time going on. I don't know why, but everybody started coming to me for some reason, and it got to be that I was doing, when I finally sold it, I was doing almost 400 funerals a year.
How many people did you have working for you at that point?
At one time I had 6.
Huh.
Yeah.
And what year did you say you sold it? It was in the 80s?
Pardon me?
What year did you sell it?
I started in 1946.
And you sold it in?
1986
Okay.
to Bob Allen, which I should have never done. That was a big mistake.
Is that something you want to talk about, or?
Well, I guess not, because I would have to. I have nothing to do with Bob Allen now. My mother always said, "Dear, he is not the person you think he is." Was she ever right?
Oh, okay. Well,
Enough
We'll let
said.
that- yeah.
we'll let that go.
Mhm.
Uh,
So was it always just Lanterman's until it was Lanterman and Allen?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it was J.H. Lanterman and Sons.
Right. Yes. That's what I'm seeing here.
Then when my grandfather died, it became Mrs. J.H. Lanterman and Sons. And then I just changed it to Lanterman Funeral Home, and it was always that until I made the mistake of taking Bob Allen in 1972, I think it was, and it became Lanterman and Allen, which it should have never became, and it stayed that. And when I finally sold it to him, and then never knowing that he was going to sell it to SCI. Of course, he did it for the money. That's why he did it.
And now
Now it's
they've
still,
closed as of February 3rd.
yeah.
They've closed the
yep.
business.
SCI finally ran it. Well, nobody wants to go to Service Corporation International, which is headquarters in Dallas, Texas. Yeah. So,
we've been talking about your parents and grandparents.
right.
Other family members, did you have siblings?
I never married. I never had children.
But did you have brothers and sisters?
One sister, Ethel Lanterman Burroughs, which is Lillian's mother, who died in 1992.
Did she go into the funeral?
Pardon me?
Did she go into the funeral business?
No. I had the funeral business until I sold, as I said, made the mistake of taking Bob Allen in as a partner, which I should not have done, but that's not over the dam.
So in 2 days, you will have lived in Monroe County for 100 years.
Right.
What are some of the biggest changes you've seen in Monroe County over the years?
Oh, well, the changes on Crystal Street, of course, where the railroad going in and out of business, and all the businesses have changed. The Lackawanna Hotel and all there used to be Zocker's men's store, and the famous store, and they're all gone. They were all, because there was the big fire, I forget what year that was, that destroyed everything up to Dunning's drugstore from the corner where you go across the railroad tracks for Analome Street, from that corner till you got up to Dunning's drugstore, which was about 5 buildings, all burned down. I don't know what year that was, but that was probably somewhere in the 1940s, maybe even the 50s, I'm not sure. Somewhere there should be in the Historical Society, somewhere the fire of East Stroudsburg that burned out half of or maybe a quarter of Crystal Street, burned from Analome Street up to, I'm sure that probably the Historical Society, maybe they don't, but I would think they would have note of that fire somewhere.
So what other changes do you see in Monroe County over 100 years?
Well, the growth of population after Interstate 80 was put in, that zoomed the population growth.
That must have had an immense impact on your business.
Oh yeah, yes.
To go up to over 400 funerals a year.
Yeah, that.
And we talked about how families are very loyal to the funeral home.
Oh yeah.
You have the same family.
If you buried grandfather, you buried grandmother, and grandfather, you buried father and mother. And
Okay.
I said we always had Lantermans, or if you went to Kaiser, which is now the Clark Funeral Home, you either had Lanterman or Kaiser. Kaiser in Stroudsburg, Lanterman in East Stroudsburg, of course. Beth Zimmerman was in East Stroudsburg, but she didn't last long. She went out of business in 1935. Once upon a time, however, they're briefly right next to the Lanterman Funeral Home, currently with the Snover Funeral Home, which is the building now. It's an art center. Right, this is the funeral home, and here's a building now which has like show windows in it. That was the Snover Funeral Home.
Right next to Lanterman.
Right next to Lanterman. I don't remember it, but it was there either when I was a child or even before, but I don't think it existed long. I never remember it being there at all, other than I see pictures of it, and I know that that's the building. And
did the funeral directors get together throughout Monroe County? You certainly would all know each
there
other.
was the Eastern Pennsylvania Funeral Directors Association, which the funeral directors from Stroudsburg, well, I was actually the only one in East Stroudsburg. Yeah, we would go to Allentown once a month. They would have the funeral directors meetings either in Allentown, Easton, Bethlehem, or occasionally in Stroudsburg. If it was Stroudsburg, once Stroudsburg got to be existing, when I hosted the Monroe County group, it would be up in Stroudsburg. But and I was always friendly with. Then it was John B. Dunkelberger Westbrook, which was on West Park Avenue. The big building is still there. Before you get to go up 611 on the left, that big home there was the Dunkelberger Westbrook Funeral Home, and of course the Glenn Kaiser Funeral Home, which is still where Clark Funeral Home wasn't as big as it is now. Clark's have expanded it, but that was the Glenn W. Kaiser. Before that, it was Brown and Keller. Brown and Keller also had a furniture store next to Wycuff's department store. Then there was an alleyway, and then there was the Brown and Keller furniture store. We also, Lanterman Funeral Home also had the Lanterman furniture store. That was common of funeral directors in those years to have both furniture and funerals, because as the population grew and there were more funerals, you didn't need the furniture business. But originally, you weren't making enough living from just the funeral business. You needed to have the furniture business to really make it worthwhile.
When did the stoplight get put in East Stroudsburg?
Pardon me?
When did the stoplight get put in East Stroudsburg?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't know when they were put there.
But the trolley used to run, right?
Pardon me?
The trolley used to run from Cortlandt Street
Yes.
and all the way over to Stroudsburg, right? Down
Right,
Washington Street.
Yeah. It went up Washington Street. Yeah.
When did that stop?
I don't remember.
Don't remember? You ever ride it?
No, I don't think so.
No?
No, that I can recall. No.
So from your discussion, I get the sense that it's helpful to be established, like you started in a business that was already established.
Right.
That it would be difficult for a new person to come into town and open up a funeral home. Because
Yes.
people they have these family loyalties that go back. And so
Exactly.
it must have been, did you see a lot of people come and go in the funeral business?
Yeah, a couple did try it and didn't. Where, a matter of fact, Richard Klofack even had a problem. He bought the Dunkelberger Westbrook Funeral Home, and when it became the Klofack Funeral Home, he even had people, because it was no longer Dunkelberger Westbrook, wouldn't go there, so he finally gave it up. And I'm friends with him to this day. He lives in Rochester, Vermont, and not a funeral director. Well, he works sometimes for a funeral home up there, but people were pretty loyal to. If you buried grandmother and grandfather, you buried mother and father, and that's the way it was. Oh yeah, you buried my grandmother, and so that's why we're having you for my dad.
One of the things you used to tell me
What?
was that you ran a funeral on time, and people really appreciated
Yeah.
that.
You were very punctual.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you're doing 400 a year, you gotta be
Yeah.
punctual, I
Oh,
guess,
yeah.
because that's
I'm
more
still
than
trying to wrap
days.
my head
Yeah,
around
there
that.
So did you
there
have a
were-
funeral in the
There were
morning
days
and one?
there were days when I got doing 2 and 3 funerals. Yeah, in the morning we'd have a 10 o'clock, and then we'd have a 1 o'clock, and then a 3 o'clock. So
So you needed to be
to
punctual.
get everybody figured in. Yeah.
And then I would guess funerals that you anticipated that would be larger, you would let more time.
Oh yeah.
If they would be.
Yeah, because people stopped having the Zimmerman Funeral Home altogether. Nobody went to them, so they all came to me, so they went out of business altogether. And then, of course, there was the ones in Stroudsburg, but it tended to be that the people that lived in Stroudsburg had the Stroudsburg Funeral Home, and the people that lived in East Stroudsburg had the East Stroudsburg Funeral Home. But occasionally, some of them from Stroudsburg came to the East Stroudsburg, even so. Not a great deal, but It was the Glenn W. Kaiser Funeral Home, which was brought by Clark's in 1949. So it's, the Clark Funeral Home has existed since 1949.
How about Thomas Funeral Home on Fifth?
Thomas Funeral Home started in 1949 also with Dave Thomas, and they unfortunately, I don't know why, because I liked, as a matter of fact, Phil Bensing, who now owns the Thomas, is going to take care of me, which is the Thomas, Bensing and Thomas. It never caught on with Dave for some reason. He was a nice person, I don't know why, but it didn't. And that was there any, I don't, yeah, there were Dunkelberg and Westbrook were there, but they didn't do it. There was the Kaiser Funeral Home, Dunkelberg and Westbrook, and Thomas Funeral Home.
How about Pula? When did
Right.
Pula?
Pula didn't come in until about 1949, I think. Also, that was oh, who was that now? Had worked for Clark's, and I can't think of the name of it before it was Pula. It was something else. Yeah.
That's a lot though in the area, in this area,
Oh,
and
yeah.
certainly across Monroe County. You know,
Yeah.
you have Kresge's and
Oh, yeah,
Gower
yeah.
out in the West End,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Bullock, and
Yeah, Kresge's do the biggest business in the West End, but Gower's a stupid. Kresge's are the big, really big funeral.
I think they're the oldest in Monroe County.
Oh, they are.
Yes.
Yeah.
So before 1870
Mhm.
Yeah.
would be. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they're nice people.
Mhm.
Even the young Kresge who runs it now, but of course it was his father, and before that his grandparents. I mean, that goes back a
It's another.
long way.
Since you were really close to the train station,
Yeah.
you know, was there a lot of activity on the train? People coming and going, and
Yeah, and even we would ship bodies on the train. They would, if somebody died away, they would be shipped in on the train, and we'd go up to the railroad station and pick up the body, the box that it came in from and take it back over to the funeral home. Or if we needed to ship somebody else, we'd take it up there and put it on the train that was going to Chicago or wherever it was going. Yeah.
I was just at the funeral home this morning. I was telling you I was in the back part, the basement that was all dirt.
Dirt, yeah.
That's an old part. Can
That
you
was
tell me about
that
the
was a
history of the
barn.
building?
There were horses up above it, of course, when they had horse and wagon. That was before my time. Yeah, but that's why that was a barn.
So did they have people on staff, like a livery service, or that took care of the horses? Did Lanterman own the horses?
They owned the horses, and they took care of them. Whoever. Yeah, that was before my time.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then you obviously moved to automobiles,
Right.
and you kept cars. You kept hearses.
First, I know. Well, we have a picture here on the wall. I think it's the 1925 Studebakers up on top of the wall here when you go up the steps. But prior to that, they were horse and wagons. That's why they had the horses, of course. That was before my time.
You know, I started to ask you earlier, and now I'm remembering. You talked about driving your dad's car or your grandfather's car when you were a teenager.
My grandfather's.
Was that funeral home business you were driving the car on?
No. It was a 1934 Graham supercharged sedan, and he didn't actually have a driver's license. So, but he had the car, so I got to use the car all the time, and he always had a nice car. He had a 1928 Studebaker President that they went to California. My Uncle John and Aunt Mabel drove my grandfather Lanterman and grandmother Lanterman to California in their 1928 Studebaker, which in those years was almost unheard of, driving to California.
Yeah.
And then they did the same thing again, I think in 1933, in a 1933 Graham Page. Yeah.
No interstate highways back then.
No.
That must have been quite
That
a
was
trip.
a real.
Yeah.
They made moving pictures, and it was a big deal. I know when I was a child, the Methodist Church, the different church, would be showing the pictures that the Lantermans took on their trip to California. They would have an evening of pictures that they took on their California trip.
Well, that's good entertainment.
Yeah, provide
And it was
entertainment.
good business too, I guess.
Yeah, sure. So you've been retired for a long time.
Oh yeah, yes, I've been retired.
Have you? How have you occupied your time? Have you traveled? Have you?
Oh yeah, I've traveled all over the world.
Yeah.
I've been around the world by plane. I've been around the world by trip. Not many places in the world that I haven't been.
Oh, yeah.
Through all of South America. Matter of fact, I took Michael to South America. Rio de Janeiro, he'd never been to South America. So I said, well, I'm going to take you. And I did. We went to Rio de Janeiro, Buenos Aires, and so forth. And took him to, then his wife got, well, he can't go unless I go. So that stopped Michael getting to go on trips.
So travel, and do you have hobbies?
Travel was always my grandfather Lanterman loved to travel. They were always going, as I say. Well, in 1928, how many people drove across the country to California? Very, very few.
Do you know how long that trip took?
No, I don't. I don't remember. I would probably a couple of weeks, I would say. But
Maybe a couple of months. I don't know.
maybe it could
Boy,
be.
back then.
Yeah, because there were no interstate highways. I mean, you know, the Lincoln Highway. Lincoln Highway was built in 1930. Lillian and I took a trip on the Lincoln Highway not too long ago. The Lincoln Highway still exists.
Yeah.
Starts in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, what over the course of your life, what are you most proud of?
Most proud of?
Yeah. What thing did you do that you're most proud of?
Running the funeral home and becoming the biggest funeral director of Lanterman. Biggest funeral home in Monroe County.
Yeah.
Proud of the fact that that's what happened, you know. But also, being in the Navy, I enjoyed being in the Navy. I thought it was like a civilian job. I was a pharmacist mate in the Navy, and as I say, I was stationed first in Sampson, New York, and then finally in Oran, Algeria. And I enjoyed Oran, and I enjoyed England when I was in England.
Mm-hmm.
The Plymouth, England had up at the top area called the Hoe, and the British women used to have chocolate, tea, donuts, and things. You could go up in the Hoe, and they would give you those. You know, you could as treats.
Well, you've lived a long life and a pretty fascinating life.
Oh yeah, yes,
Yeah.
I basically would say I have had a nice life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fortunately, I never suffered. I know when I was a child, my mother used to feed bums out of the back door who came begging for food. That was back in the 1930s. I never lived through any of that. We always had sufficient. Even in 1933, We had a brand new Chevrolet and went to the 1933 World's Fair in Chicago. We always lived. I never knew what living poverty would be like because we never lived in poverty. We always had sufficient. We never were wealthy, but we were never poor either. So.
Yeah. Well, is there some part of your life we should have asked you about? Are there some questions I should have asked you? Something that you wanted to talk about that we haven't covered?
Not that I can think of.
Well, I think we covered a lot of stuff. That was fascinating.
Yeah. I enjoyed the funeral business. If you can enjoy the funeral business, only from the fact of people were always pleased with my helping them, and that always pleased me that they were happy. Never. And then Dan Spoluto, who worked for me, and everybody was always very happy with Dan. And I had many people say, "How nice he." That's who I should have sold it to, not Bob Allen. I should have sold it to Dan Spoluto, but I didn't. And Dan still lives up here off of Phillips Street, I think, back up in that area. I think he did work at Walmart, I think in Mount Pocono, but I don't think he does anymore. I'm not sure.
Well, it sounds like it's a testament to your kindness that you see people during their most difficult days.
Yeah.
And they're very appreciative of.
Oh, they were very. I used to get very nice thank you letters for thanking me for taking care of their mother or father or whatever. They were appreciated, that in itself meant a lot to me. The letters, not just the money, but of course I never overcharged people either. I didn't try to gouge them. I never tried to push anybody. If you wanted the cheapest casket available, you bought the cheapest casket available. I didn't try to sell you a copper or a bronze. Or matter of fact, there was a rare occasion when I sold a copper casket. Almost had a celebration for this. Rarely that anybody ever bought a copper casket. Although my parents, mother and dad, and they're all buried in copper caskets. But of course that was wholesale to me.
Is that the cream of the crop? The copper is the best?
Copper or bronze.
Yeah.
We didn't even try. Bronze was out of the question for most people, including I couldn't see spending the difference. When you got into that, it was like buying a Cadillac or a Rolls Royce. You didn't buy the Cadillac or the Rolls Royce, you bought the Cadillac, You didn't buy the bronze, you bought the copper.
Well, I think that's a good place to end. Do you have any other questions, Amy?
No, just thank you very much and happy birthday.
Well, thank you.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, I'm not really looking forward to they're going to have, I think, a full house at the Elks, and I wish they weren't, on Friday night. It seems everybody and his brother's coming, and I'd rather they didn't. So.
Well, the community just wants to celebrate you.
I guess. But Lillian can tell you, but I think she knows something about what's going on there. I don't know. Aren't they having a big dinner on Friday night at the Elks or something?
Yes, there's a very big dinner at Friday night at the Elks for you for your 100th birthday. Yes.
It's not every day a Monroe County citizen turns 100, so
Yes,
we have to party.
You're going to be recognized for your 100 years. Yes, you are.
And all that you've done for Monroe County and the citizens.
So.
The Veterans Park there, the little park when you come across there's the two benches there. I donated those benches in that park for one in honor of my father's service and one in honor of my service. One on each side.
He also donated the grand piano in the
Pardon me?
library. You also donated the grand piano in the library in memory of your.
Oh, yeah, in
my
memory of your
sister.
mother.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
uh-huh.
and of course, awesome.
Many,
Yeah.
many things throughout.
Yeah,
Well, we were
it's-
just about to wrap it up. Is there anything we should have asked him about that we didn't? That
Well,
you,
he's been a very benevolent person with the.
no, we haven't covered that. That's true.
Yeah, he's been very benevolent with the Salvation Army.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, he's put a lot of money into the Elks Club, into their funds for the building funds and things like that.
Awesome.
Awesome.
I give
and
12,000 a year even now to, awesome.
So he's.
I give him, I need to write the other additional 2, I've given him 10, I need to write 2,000 more. I try to give him 12,000 a year. That's the animal shelter.
Yeah, yeah.
And I always loved dogs. Of course, I have my Oliver here. This is actually Oliver's house. He lets us
Oliver's
live
king
here.
Yeah.
He lets us live
He is
here.
king.
He lets you
It's
stay,
just-
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, a dog, we felt a dog at his age would be, because they lay down and you don't see him.
Is Oliver out there on the heater in the dining
I
room?
expect he is, yeah.
If you look
He is.
out there at the dining room,
Yeah.
there's he's
So that's
probably
what
laying on top of
we
the
opted
heater.
not for a dog.
You see him?
Mhm.
And I think the cats, and the cats are very good companions for
Yeah. Loves animals.
people, and he loves his
If he
animals.
don't get what he wants, he meet me that Patrice Suma. He makes an absolute fool of himself over her. And when he came to the door, she could hear it. He was meow, meow, meow before she even got in the door.
Yeah, he was just.
And then he just
Well, she hadn't been here.
falls all over her.
But,
It's almost pathetic, isn't it, Lily?
It is pathetic, yes, it
Yeah.
is, but, but anyway, he's.
He
been,
absolutely adores her.
He's been.
All right,
You've
well-
been a pillar of the community.
You have
You've
been,
done a
for
lot of
sure.
things for the
Pardon me?
community.
You said you've been a pillar of the community, and I think everybody agrees.
His
Well-
name is on a plaque at Lehigh Valley Hospital over here for
Yeah.
donating an operating room.
A plaque because he donated an operating room at Lehigh Valley Hospital.
The operating, oh yeah, the hospital.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I donated the lobby and an operating room
Wow.
at the Pocono Hospital, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well,
but,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, there are
that-
plaques that say so.
That's why you had 400 funerals a year.
Pardon me?
Yes.
Because you gave back to the community
Yes.
all those
Yeah.
years.
Oh yeah, uh-huh. Yeah, every time Bill Kramer would come to me, or please this or that, could you give 50,000? I said, yeah, okay, I will give you 50,000, and that would be for whatever.
Yeah.
Bill Kramer's always been big about getting donations for things.
yeah.
Still is. His birthday's 2 days from mine.
How old was
Bill's
he?
will be on the, I think his is on the
How old's he gonna be?
13th, pardon me?
How old's he gonna be?
Bill?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, he's in the 80s, I
I was
think.
gonna say, he's gotta be.
He's Kramer, Kramer Sweats McManus, the attorneys. And of course his grandparents were, excuse me, the Kramer Lumber Company, which is now Blue Ridge Kramer Lumber Company. Yeah. But,
Well, I think we're going to wrap it up. That was great. Well, thanks very much.
well, you're very welcome. Thank you for coming.